Chapter 18. The Sectional Struggle Renews. Introduction.
In this lecture, we will study in detail how the Union irretrievably dissolved into the chaos and calamity of the Civil War, which nobody wanted, and which everybody wanted to be over quickly when it came, but which nobody, in the end, knew how to stop. There is a school of history, the determinists, who opine endlessly about the inevitability of history, how events tend to happen by themselves, because the phenomenon of cause and effect is beyond our control. Event A causes event B, and so on to event Z, and there's no stopping the chain of cause and effect unless you can foresee a few events down the road before they happen and interrupt the chain. All that does, though, is start another chain over which you also have no control. The start of World War I was, say the determinists, an accurate illustration of how the script of history's events is written without us and cannot be changed by us. We are only needed to push over the first domino of the cause and effect chain. Then all the other dominoes fall predictably, even inevitably. We provide the first cause, then the effect is provided by the acting out of immutable laws of nature that we do not write and did not invent. Just as Newton did not invent the laws of motion which define the movements of the stars, but merely discovered them. The accumulating events which caused the American Civil War, say the determinists, can be looked at this way. Well-meant attempts were made to prevent the war for 30 years, including several compromises which held the conflict at bay for decades at a time, but in the end all was in vain. The war came with the inevitability of death itself, inflicting pain and suffering impartially on all alike. And indeed, Americans received it like the news of a death in the family, their family, everybody's family. The war was, in fact, a kind of national death, and at the end of it, the only way to justify it was with the hope that some new kind of a new birth redeemed all the suffering, a new birth of freedom, as Abraham Lincoln described it. In this lecture, you will learn all the causes that created all the effects which slid the country down the slippery slope of rancor and mistrust into the maw of war over a period of 30 years. You will learn how the lopsided victory of the United States in the Mexican-American War actually helped set the stage for our own Civil War 15 years later. You will learn how the brilliant idea of popular sovereignty, the most grassroots concept of democracy ever invented, ironically also helped bring on the war, though the intentions of those who invented popular sovereignty were just the opposite. You will learn why just ignoring the creeping causes of the war, as both mainstream political parties tried to do when they ran out of ideas, became itself a cause of the war. You will learn why the sudden entrance of California into the Union, which happened so fast that Californians skipped territorial status altogether and went straight into statehood, became yet another cause. You will learn other contributing causes as well: the creation of the new Free Soil political party, the slave revolts of Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, the death-dancing adventures of Harriet Tubman and the Underground Railroad, the heart-tugging stories of Harriet Beecher Stowe and Uncle Tom's Cabin, the shouting, cane-throwing, fisticuff compromise of 1850 and its corrosive fugitive slave law, the pretentious blustering of William Seward and his higher law and irrepressible conflict ideas, the sleazy evil of the slave-catcher bounty hunters and the futile personal liberty laws passed to slow them down, the Supreme Court's dreaded Dred Scott decision, the barroom brawl in the Senate between Charles Sumner and Preston Brooks. You will learn why even projects which were intended to benefit the whole country, including the Southerners, became contributory causes of the war. Projects like digging the Panama Canal, building colleges for farm kids out on the prairie, building a transcontinental railroad, and rechartering a national bank to organize how the government would pay for all of this. Nothing, it seemed, could be done, or even attempted, that did not generate more rancor and resentment between North and South. You will learn how it all came to this. You'll also learn why everything the Southerners did also did nothing to lessen the decibel level of Northerners and Southerners shouting at each other. Projects like their idea of acquiring Cuba as a State of the Union. That was Manifest Destiny Southern style. You will learn why just trying to carve states out of the huge territories of the Louisiana Purchase could also not even be attempted without starting a mini-civil war out on the prairie between northern and southern partisans, most of whom didn't even live there. Even the magisterial interposition of the Supreme Court, trying, as they thought of it, to referee between northerners and southerners on any of these issues, was variously interpreted by both sides as just another sneaky attempt by the other guy to cover his tyrannical and controlling intentions with a pretentious gloss of legal objectivity. Never was the Supreme Court held in such universal contempt, and you will learn why nothing they could do could change that. You will learn why even the financial fortunes and misfortunes of the Wall Street bubble-busting bankers in far-off New York City, whose peccadillos and shenanigans affected only the northern economy, still became a cause for beating the war drums down south among the plantation elites. You will learn why John Brown, marching, so he thought, towards the country's destiny with a Bible in one hand and a bloody axe in the other, could become, in those touchy times, almost a one-man cause of the Civil War, all by himself, though his lease on life expired almost as quickly as his name got into the newspapers. You will learn why the Southerners quaked in fear by day and slept but fitfully at night, unconsoled by the magnolia-perfumed splendor of their mansioned estates and the sleepy songs of their, so they thought, contented slaves, imagining by day and visited by night by the specter of the imminent demise of all that they and their ancestors had so laboriously built with such pride and expectation over the generations, sometimes going back to before the Revolution, before there even was a country. Certainly before the iron-monstered industrial behemoth of the North bludgeoned and bribed its way into the halls and councils of what used to be the people's government and brazenly put its factory-made boot on the Southern neck of pride and history. Yes, the Southerners quaked and feared, though they still had their men on the Supreme Court, though the last 5 presidents had either been on their side or had pledged to leave them alone, including Abraham Lincoln, though the Senate could pass no legislation contrary to their interests, though their Southern economy was self-sufficient and they didn't actually need the Northerners for anything, though the British were their economic allies because the British needed their cotton, though the Northern bankers in New York and the textile manufacturers in New England were also their allies, though they didn't admit it, because they needed Southern cotton for their looms and their profits, though there was still plenty of land in the South to further expand their cotton kingdom, though the Southerners didn't even need the slave trade anymore because they had their own homegrown supply of slaves right there on the plantation. But still, in spite of this impressive security and all of these economic, political, and even cultural advantages which the Northerners admitted the Southerners possessed, the Southern elite quaked anyway. In this lecture you will discover why they could not sleep at night. Maybe the historical determinists are right like Sophocles and the Greek tragedians were right. Maybe history really is a done deal, and we are just along for the ride, pawns in a cosmic game of inevitability, needed only to lean on an occasional domino to start the chain reaction so the gods can amuse themselves with another round of watching our hubris turn to ashes of regret. Because, as we know, the war did come, as dependably as the seasons unfolded later over the graves of the slain. You will learn plenty in this lecture which will allow you to evaluate the determinists' contention that the war was inevitable. Can you discredit their theory? You could write a term paper on that and secure your place in class as a leading scholar on the causes of the American Civil War.